Good evening and welcome to this 40th Legislative District Live Telephone Town Hall with your State Senator Liz Lovelett and your State Representatives Debra Lekanoff and Alex Ramel. If you have a question for your lawmakers, please press 0 now. The 40th Legislative District includes San Juan County and parts of Skagit and Whatcom counties, including Anacortes and Burlington, and parts of Bellingham and Mount Vernon. My name is Lily, and I will be your host tonight. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Today is the 73rd day of this 105-day session, and your state lawmakers want to give you an update and answer your questions. So please press 0 on your phone to ask a question, and you'll be placed on the queue. Again, we are calling you tonight because your lawmakers want to answer your questions. Press 0 to ask them about the issues that matter to you, such as healthcare, education, the environment, technology, energy, transportation, and the budget. So, if you have a question for State Senator Liz Lovelett and State Representatives Debra Lekanoff and Alex Ramel, please press 0 right now to speak with your lawmakers. Remember, press 0 on your phone right now to ask a question. I will now turn it over to your legislators for some opening remarks. Let's start with Senator Lovelett.
Thank you so much, Lily. This is Liz Lovelett. Really excited to be here with everyone tonight. You know, we had our in-person town hall a couple of weeks ago. Maybe there's some of you that were able to attend that are joining us tonight, and welcome back. And if not, we want to welcome everybody who was able to make it to our teletown hall tonight. We had about 250 people at our in-person town hall, and it just really goes to show how many folks in our district are wanting to participate in their democracy and make sure they know the ins and outs of how we arrive at our decision-making, especially when times are challenging and unprecedented as we're experiencing right now, both at the state and the federal level. Just to kind of get us kicked off, we have just released our preliminary budgets in both the Senate and the House on the operating and transportation budgets and awaiting the release of the capital budget. We have put forward a number of measures to help reduce costs and spending, but we've also put forward a number of policies in order to help us reach better tax equity in Washington state. So we're in the heat of the session where we're going to be making big decisions in the coming weeks to make sure we have a balanced budget that has the right mix of new revenue and protection of the programs and services that Washingtonians count on. A couple of things about kind of how we got here. You know, we had a pandemic that we came out of where we were getting a tremendous amount of federal support, and what really highlighted was a tremendous amount of need in our communities, both for education, for childcare, for health services, for food security, for kids who wanted to go to college, and your state government answered that call. And then, like many other states across the nation, we found ourselves without that federal support and trying to figure out how to make sure we maintain those critical services that make our communities strong. So that's kind of our starting position. We want to make sure that we're creating a budget that doesn't make the most vulnerable among us have to pay the brunt of these changes, and really want to make sure that we create a balanced budget that works for Washingtonians and helps us enjoy our incredible quality of life. Glad to be here with you tonight.
All right. Thank you, folks. Please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers tonight. And now we're continuing with Representative Lekanoff.
Hi, it's great to be here with all of you guys and with my good friends Liz and Alex. I'm Representative Debra Lekanoff. I'd be amiss if I didn't pause and recognize our past Speaker Frank Chopp, who we lost this last week. Many of you may not know a piece of history for Washington state. Frank Chopp was the longest standing speaker with over 20 years in the United States of all 50 states, and he was elected each year by his colleagues. I think one thing I learned from Frank Chopp is he found balance between both parties, and he strived to create strong relationships at the Senate with our executive branch and our judicial branch. And as I pause and I look at my friends Liz and Alex, I can't help but appreciate both of them, because I think the three of us strive for those same goals, and really looking towards something that I wanted to remind us as we went through the budget reductions in the appropriations, which manages our operating budget. A thread that I was telling my two friends here that Frank Chopp passed down to us in the past 20 years is remembering home, health, and hope I think these values have been guiding both the Senate and the House as we look at budget reductions and try and collaborate on focusing on those important areas of taking care of our most vulnerable families. We are all striving to create a balanced budget, and what that means taking a look at our budget reductions and remembering where we need to find progressive revenue. All three of us sit in leadership positions and in those important committees where the entire 40th district's values are being heard. We're looking at budget reductions that we're going to have to face in education, but we're looking at where there might be budget reductions. How do we provide the progressive revenue to focus on special education, which the Senate has really taken a great focus on in the House, and basic education for our MSOC. We did not take any cuts this year to our teachers, and we want to continue to help support our teachers this year in their retirement. They're the ones that take care of our little ones the most. Where we're looking at focusing on food security and protecting that to make sure not only do we have senior nutrition, but we have nutrition for our children who are in school systems and those who are in their after-school programs. Housing continues to be the number one areas that we're focusing, where we'll see budget reductions. We're also seeing revenue enhancements and also investments across housing supply. Whether you may see a fiscal reduction, you're going to see policy relief and regulation relief, where we can continue to be the number one state in the nation that provides steps forward in the Senate and the House to increase housing supply. We're going to talk tonight about how we're going to continue to invest in immigration and refugee support, our health care, behavioral health, and taking care of our long-term care. Climate Commitment Act continues to be one of our leading revenue investments. Thank you to the state of Washington for protecting that. But with climate change commitment, we raise the values of Washington State, which for us is important as I stand next to my two colleagues here, preserving the salmon, investing in climate change, jobs, the economy, and making sure for generations from now that those who call Washington State home, whether there are tribes who've been here since time immemorial, or whether it is the people that have come to Washington State and want to be part of taking care of this great place that we all live in. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys have been amazing in the 40th, and I wouldn't be here without all of your time and commitment and your voices that you extend to all three of us here.
All right. Thank you, folks. Please remember to press 0 if you have a question for your representatives or your senator. And now we are going to finish the opening remarks with Representative Alex Ramel.
Thanks, Aurelia. This is Alex Ramel. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight and tuning in. I kind of make this joke at every town hall, but when I go last after these two amazing partners, there's not as much left for me to say, and it's great to be on a team where we all really do think the same and are working towards the same goals. I will just mention a couple of things and excited to get to everybody's questions. Just backing up what Debra said about the challenges in our budget. And I will say for me, and I think all of us on the Democratic side, our priorities in our investments have to be about protecting people, saving lives, and health. And so we do have a difficult budget year in front of us. With the upside-down tax code that we have, we are unfortunately really vulnerable to swings in the economy, tariffs, recession, et cetera. And we are facing some real challenges. We can make some meaningful and wise reductions in the budget. Some things that will be difficult to do, some things that are less difficult to do. I'll give one example. I've got a bill that closes a tax loophole right now on buying and selling gold coins. That will save $100 million over the next 4 years. We should definitely do that. But there are other cuts that are not as easy to make that we're going to be facing in the next couple of weeks. And for me, we can make some of those cuts, but when it comes to things that are going to hurt health or human lives, we're going to have to turn to folks who are doing well and ask them to chip in a little bit more. And we've seen that in proposals in both the House and Senate for progressive revenue this year. And we will continue to debate the merits of some of those different proposals and how we can piece together a healthy budget. But for me, asking folks who have more than $50 million in stocks and bonds to pay a intangible property tax on those assets is a important part of that solution. So those are the kinds of revenues that we're looking at and that I'd support. And the last thing I'll mention, just because I know folks on the line care a lot about rent stabilization, we have passed a rent stability bill out of the House. It's in the Senate. Happy to report that it's moved out of committee this week, and it is moving towards the finish line. No promises, but I am more hopeful every day that we're going to get that done and protect renters from huge rent increases, capping rent increases at no more than 7% per year. With that, I'll pause. Looking forward to everybody's questions. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, folks. You are in a live telephone town hall with your state representatives, Debra Lekanoff and Alex Ramel, and your state senator, Liz Lovelett from the 40th District. If you have a question for all of them or for any of them, please press 0 right now. A couple of things, a couple of announcements. We are streaming this town hall also in Spanish. So I'm going to ask that everybody, the lawmakers and the people asking the questions, please pause and speak slowly if you can. I will try to remember to do that myself. We sent you a survey to send us your questions in advance, and some of you did. So we're going to start with one of those internet questions. This one is from Kelly. I'm going to read it. The ECAP program has made a hugely positive impact on my family's life. Will you oppose the elimination of early ECAP?
Hey there, this is Senator Lovelett, and Kelly, thank you for the question. ECAP is an incredible program that really improves people's lives, improves outcomes for young kids, and is such a huge benefit to families. We don't have any proposals on the table to eliminate ECAP, but what we did do is delay some of the expansion of that benefit by being able to raise the income qualifying provisions. So we left those in place so that as we start bearing the hopeful benefit of some progressive revenue, we left all of that structure in place so that we can continue to build that program back up to a level. Sometimes you go big and go home, and then turns out, we went a little too big and didn't have all the resources for it in these trying times. But we left the structure there so we can continue to expand the program. And for folks that are currently qualifying, we'll continue to have access to ECAP.
Thank you. Okay, so folks, press 0 if you have a question. And our first live question is with Marco, who has a question about the budget. Hi, Marco. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Senator Lovelett and Representative Lekanoff and Representative Alex Ramel. This is Marco Morales from Mount Vernon.
Hey, Marco.
How's it going?
Good. What you got for us?
I'm calling in to see if you all have an idea of when the budget will be passed this session, kind of rough dates.
Do you want to talk about what it is?
Well, our session is over on April 27th. So on a good year, we pass it a day or two ahead of that. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. We're all shooting to be done by the end of April. And I think you will see the results of the conference negotiation maybe a few days even before that. So you'll have a sense of what it will look like. But by April 27th, if all goes according to plan.
Marco, it would be really fun if you sign into TVW. I think you're going to be able to see Alex and Liz and Liz in the House working the Senate budget through that end, Alex and I through our end. Friday in the House, we'll be going through an appropriations, working on the operating budget. There's some incredible positions, I think, that you'll be able to hear when you attend the Ways and Means Committee to be able to review theirs, our Appropriations Committee, and Alex sits in the Finance Committee, and he's been working hard his as well. I think Alex is right. If we can get out of here by the 27th, usually the budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Liz and Alex, but the budget should be implemented by the end of June, beginning of July.
Yeah, usually the budget gets implemented 90 days after we adjourn, depending on when the governor signs it. But we will be voting it off. It should get voted out of Ways and Means tomorrow. The Senate budget will then get voted off the Senate floor on Saturday. Then we send it to the House to start the conference process.
Pretty exciting. And Alex, as the whip, I'm going to guess we get ours off the floor on Monday. There we go. Fingers crossed. There you go, Marco. You'll see us on TVW.
Thank you. Folks, please press 0 on your phone right now if you have a question. Our next question is also from the survey, the Internet survey. And this one is specifically the caller or the person who submitted the question said that he would like a response from Alex Ramel. And the question is from Gary. Can you explain why state legislators are seeking to raise taxes to fix the state budget deficit as opposed to aligning state spending with state revenues through spending decreases? And can you clearly articulate whether you would vote for or against House Bill 2049, which proposes to increase property taxes?
Great, thank you, and thanks for the question, Gary. So as we've been talking about, the budget deficit is a real challenge, and it has significant impacts on folks who rely on state for Medicaid, for Medicare. It has huge impacts for folks like the previous question, folks who depend on state for early childhood education, our school systems, and higher education. And so when we're faced with having to make cuts that would impact people's health, people's lives, and really put us on a path to undoing important work in our education system, I'm going to always ask folks who are doing better off to chip in a little bit more rather than asking the poorest to bear that burden. With regards to House Bill 2049, I would support that as part of a package, again, that focuses on progressive revenue. And I just want to emphasize that House Bill 2049 is an increase in property taxes. What it does is it allows for an increased rate of growth. So right now, property taxes in Washington state can grow at a maximum of 1% per year, which does not keep up with inflation. And so we're seeing that the budget is growing at a slower pace than the cost of all of the things that we want to buy. And that bill in particular, the revenue from it is dedicated to funding the state's paramount duty, kindergarten through 12th grade education. So if the question is, are we going to take care of our kids, even if it's a tough decision, the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, thank you. Folks, please press 0 on your phone if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up, we have Anne, who has a question about ICE. Hi, Anne.
Hi. Yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Last night, Alfredo Juarez, yesterday morning, was taken by ICE in Skagit County. And he's a union leader and a union organizer and has been here a long time and is now up, as I understand, in the Ferndale Detention Center. What can you do as our leaders to both help get him protection, because I think it's a great intimidation is what they did for our farm workers, and how can we keep ICE out of Skagit County and Washington State? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Anne. And as I look to Liz and Alex, all three of us are going to share an answer because this is so important to us. And Lilo is a great friend of all of us, but also one of the leading advocates in our Hispanic and Latino community that shares with us the unbalanced and vulnerable impacts that they're facing every day. We have an opportunity to work with our speaker, or our chair of our House Democratic Caucus, and the Speaker of the House on what our state legislators and our state agencies are allowed to do under our jurisdiction. We have all provided information to C2C, Community to Action, which is spread their wings to sharing information across the Skagit, Whatcom County, Snohomish, all the way east to Yakima County, on what we can do to ensure that there's information being shared to our Hispanic and Latino family when there is an ICE incident, what their rights are, where to contact, where they can find information, and when they're able to be able to guide it if there is, in fact, an ICE raid in their community. We are all collectively working at the local, state, federal levels with our governing bodies to stay connected, to work through all our different jurisdictions, and to lean into the federal jurisdiction, which is addressing this in particular with our Washington State congressional members. I know Liz and Alex also have been engaged with me. I'm going to turn to them to share a little bit of news as well.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind, the last time Trump came into office, we passed a piece of legislation called Keep Washington Working, which ensures that the jurisdiction of our local and county law enforcement is not to do immigration enforcement. There are certain provisions where they're required to work with ICE if there is a criminal record, if they have a warrant out for somebody's arrest, but absent that, our local law enforcement are directed by the state to not engage in immigration enforcement. And let's face it, as we hear from people every day around public safety, they don't have the time for that anyway. It's not their job, and that's not what they're charged to do. That said, it's really dark times in the federal government, and so the best thing we can continue to do is sound the alarm when people in our community are detained by ICE, and we are working internally to make sure we have clear kind of chain of custody of information to the Attorney General's office and to our congressional delegation to make sure that at the very least we know the names of people who have been detained so that we can keep an eye and make sure that they are have the ability to have due process.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, please, go ahead.
I don't have more to add to that other than just would also mention that the Keep Washington Working Act also covers our schools. So our school systems are, and those employees are also here to make sure that kids get a good education, not to work on the immigration enforcement. This is such a hard time, and I guess I would just share also that one of the things we all need to do is make sure that we're doing everything we can to stand together and stick together. I believe that these actions are done with a purpose to divide us and frighten us, and standing together and standing strong is the proper response.
All right. I think that there was going to be some other information there. The Commission on Hispanic Affairs, can somebody explain more about that?
Yes. So the Commission on Hispanic Affairs has a rapid response hub. These hubs are able to provide information and be able to share any outreach that's needed to communities that are facing these critical situations. The information, I think, is going to be able to is being shared on both Alex and mine website, and also or in our newsletters, and also Liz has shared that information out as well.
Okay, so I know that I sound like a broken record, but please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up, we have a live question with Bradley about the state of our roads. Hi, Bradley. Bradley?
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So just wondering, from what I understand, Washington has not been spending the money on maintenance with the roads, and I can definitely tell because I run up and down these roads all the time, and it's beating the tar out of my equipment. So it's kind of like this. If you have a vehicle that the motor's ready to give up, the transmission's ready to give up, you spend money on buying brand new rims, a paint job, a nice stereo system. When we have roads here, you don't spend extra money on projects that you can't afford. You need to fix what you've got already.
Well, I think we caught the gist of it, Bradley, and I appreciate the question, and I may copy your metaphor for a floor speech sometime. You're absolutely right. Investing in maintenance for our state highway system ought to be our priority. That has not always been the case in Washington. For the last few years, that has been the first spending item that we don't touch when we're writing our transportation budget. So we are making cuts. We are delaying some big highway projects in the budget that has been proposed in both the House and the Senate. And I believe it's true in both budgets that the thing that we're protecting is highway maintenance, because taking care of what we have is the right move. And, you know, in the 40th District, we see that especially because one of the parts of our highway system that has not been taken care of over preceding decades was our ferry system. And when we don't make the investments in midlife maintenance on vessels, they don't last as long. And that's a big contributing factor to the instability in the ferry system that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. So we ought to change course, so to speak, and do that right going forward. And that's definitely a commitment from this team, and the House and Senate Democrats have been working steadily on prioritizing maintenance. It's not as fun to show up at a ribbon cutting for repairing the road as it is for opening something new. But we know that that is actually the best investment.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question. Next question is from the Internet survey from Jade. Funding for sexual and reproductive health care in our communities is under threat, both from Washington State's very large budget shortfall and by potential huge federal losses like massive Medicaid cuts. Cutting funding to health care is a mistake. Not only would we lose some essential services that primarily impact people who are already struggling, it's wasteful.
Hey there, Jade. This is Liz again. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we need to center people's access to health and wellness as we move forward in this budget. And I think especially with the very disturbing things we've been hearing out of the federal administration around making cuts to medical services and to Social Security. So we here in Washington State are trying to make sure as much as possible we can keep our Medicare benefits available and our public option available for folks. We've been making some big changes in how we do reimbursements for people who are retired so that they can get more benefit out of their retirement packages to make sure that folks are able to have it affordably. And I think in a world post the Dobbs decision in Washington State, just know that we are going to always stand behind the ability for people in our communities to have access to reproductive health care and abortion access, gender-affirming care. It's a cornerstone of who we are as Democrats, and it's a cornerstone of what we'll continue to provide in our budget.
All right. Thank you. So we're going to go with another Internet question, and this one is from Ron. Give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Ron asks, we know that large corporations are gobbling up rental properties and raising rents at will, many using RealPage to justify the increases. We also know that this is increasing the unhoused in our communities, particularly from its impact on mobile home parks. Why hasn't any bill been put forth that would stifle this egregious activity? You say that something has been proposed both last year and this, but this year's bill would still allow them to increase rents by 7%, which is way too much.
Thank you for the question. I will say that the rent stabilization bill I mentioned at the top does address the RealPage concern with consumer protections. And just for folks who aren't in the weeds on this, what's been happening is that some property management companies have been buying up lots of land, lots of properties, and using a software tool that allows them to sort of collude to set prices and set rents and raise rents throughout the area. It's almost certainly illegal, and the Attorney General's office has taken action when they've been caught. But by expanding the consumer protections in the rent stabilization bill that I mentioned earlier, we will give additional avenue for folks to have another course of redress other than just the Attorney General. The second point I heard in there is the concern that a 7% per year rent increase is too high. And I both agree and I believe that progress is important. I've introduced a bill in the past that started at 3%, and we are, and it is important for us to, recognize the challenges that small landlords and others face. And a negotiated compromise of 7% will stop the most egregious and serious rent increases that are happening. It's not everything we would have wanted, but I firmly believe that making progress is better than waiting for, my dream bill. And I would also just emphasize that 7% is not the automatic increase. That is the maximum allowed under the legislation. It isn't the automatic. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question.
I think, Alex, if I can add to that, just a little bit of good news as I came out of the Housing Committee today. Really great news. The rent stabilization moved out of the Senate Housing Committee today, and it did include a cap of 5% for manufactured housing. And we just learned that. I just learned that about 45 minutes ago, team. So I'm really excited to share that. It's rent stabilization bill is making its way to the Senate floor. And I think there's been some great champions in there that are also going to include additional positive work that will continue to move forward. I think also, as we were talking about the algorithms earlier, thank you for saying and talking about that, Alex. The algorithms that's used in real estate and used in the housing market, we passed a bill that came from the Senate that also put a limitation on the use of algorithms that is being harmful, that's impacting our housing and our real estate market. There's continued work. I talk about also with rent stabilization, while we're increasing and stabilizing our rent, we're also moving bills that are going to help us address the housing supply. I don't know if you heard me earlier, but Washington State is the #1 state in the nation that's increasing housing supply. Simple economics for us, if we increase housing supply, we balance out our rent stabilization. We're going to be able to take care of the 1 million homes that Washington State is looking towards our goal for the next 20 years. And there's all kinds of diverse bills from lot splitting to ADUs and to working with private companies to be able to participate in housing options. So a lot of good work, I think. I'm really excited to be on the Housing Committee. It's my first year. My two good friends, Liz and Alex, have been working in this field for a long time at local and state government and nonprofits. So we'll continue to move forward.
Thanks. Let's see. We still have about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little less left on this call. So please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up, we have Nathaniel, who has a question about increasing healthcare costs. Hi, Nathaniel.
Hi, Senator. Hi, Representatives. Hope you're doing well tonight, and thank you so much for doing a town hall in the middle of session. My question is about SB 5793, and my wife works for the State Employees Union, and I work for the Skagit County government, and I'm concerned about how SB 5793 has the potential to raise state employee health care premiums while stopping collective bargaining and taking away union rights and workers' rights while doing that. This is a very scary precedent for me as a government employee because it's essentially saying that we can't bargain over health care when it's no longer convenient. So my question to you would be, do you support this bill as a measure to solve our budget deficit? And if so, how do we reconcile this with it being kind of a significant blow to workers' rights?
Yeah, so that bill just got dropped earlier this week. We don't even have a bill report for it yet, so it still has to work its way through the Ways and Means process before it comes to the floor. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, and just keep in mind, as state employees, we will also see an increase to our healthcare costs, which, nobody likes, and we're trying to figure out how to balance a really large and complex system to make sure we don't have to cut people's benefits. So there's definitely different approaches between the House and Senate budget around kind of what happens with folks in the state family. There's definitely going to be a lot of negotiations between here and there to get that right. So my best suggestion would be know that, especially if you're in a union, your bargaining unit is down here fighting over these issues. And so just make sure to keep in touch with them and keep in touch with our offices. But it's, we're putting a lot of proposals out on the table to try to figure out how to make the budget balance. And it's going to be a process of elimination and, how much discomfort we're all going to feel in order to keep some of our critical programs intact.
Nathaniel, there's a few bills that also passed out of appropriations that are going to be sitting in rules that is going to bring the Senate and the House together to talk about retirement funds, health care benefits, and collective bargaining. So it's going to be, I think we saw that there were about 4 weeks left, but I definitely would take a look at the appropriations and the Ways and Means budget and take a look at the PEB and SEB, take a look at your health care benefits and your collective bargaining. And some of those bills are still, as Liz said, being negotiated, will be discussed by budget writers, by the Ways and Means, and the Appropriations and the Finance Committee. So much more work to be done.
Thank you. Okay, please press 0 if you have a question. Next up, we have James, who has a question about the FIT tax. Hi, James. James?
Hello?
Go ahead, ask your question, please.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, I was caught a little off guard. So I noticed that the Senate version of the budget includes, the proposed budget includes a 1% wealth tax on stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc., on 4,300 people, or about 0.5% of the state population. And that's estimated to raise $4 billion a year by 2027. And if such a small tax can raise this much money, then clearly there is more than enough out there to avoid cuts entirely, either to social services, colleges, Western. I'm a student there, etc. I imagine that this could be done through a higher rate on those intangibles or through similar measures. And so my question for any of you is, are there ways that these measures can be amended to accomplish this goal and avoid cuts to these services, which obviously nobody wants? So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. I appreciate the question. And it's great to see that folks are reading the stuff that we're putting out there and getting into the details. I think I got picked to answer this one because I sit on the Finance Committee. There are slightly different versions of the financial intangibles, what sometimes gets called the wealth tax, in both the House and the Senate. And I guess what I would say is that, to your question, could we just raise the rate and avoid any cuts? There's unfortunately 2 reasons why that would not work, maybe 3. The first is that that financial intangibles tax is a property tax, and our Constitution limits property taxes to a maximum of 1% per year. So we could not do that under the Constitution. The second challenge that we're facing as we consider that tax is that it's new and will take time to set up. And so the budget that we're writing is a 4-year budget, but it has to balance over the next year and the next 2 years. take time both for Department of Revenue to set up and frankly for it to go through court, because we anticipate that if we introduce this, that it will likely be challenged, almost certainly will be challenged, and needs to be reviewed by the courts. I feel confident that we've set it up in a way that it will be found constitutional, but there will almost be certainly be somebody with deep pockets who wants to oppose it. So we'll have to wait for that court challenge to play out, which means that revenue won't be useful in the first couple of years after, if and after we pass it. So that's why we're looking at a couple of different revenue options and trying to mix and match to come up with something that solves the puzzle. Great question.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have another live question. Here is Sherry with a question about special ed. Hi, Sherry. Or Cheryl, sorry. Cheryl?
Hello.
Hi. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
My husband and I are getting along in years, and my daughter would very much like to be able to live near us to be able to help us out. I've got some surgery disabilities, and we need help. My daughter is the mother of a autistic child who is getting services in his schools in Southern California. Of course, some of these funds that come in for disabilities with young children are coming from the Department of Education that is being threatened with being cut. My hope is that there will be some means of providing hope for her to be able to move here without her son going without help. I know the education budget is one of the really stressed parts of our budget. And in terms of taking care of kids like my grandson with special needs, what is a hope horizon on being able to deal with not only the incoming cuts coming from the Department of Education from Washington, but being able to support kids like this in Washington State?
Thanks for the question, Cheryl. This is Liz again. So right before House of Origin cutoff, the Senate passed kind of the biggest single move to fully fund special education that we've done in our state's history, investing over $2 billion over the 5-year outlook. And as you can imagine, with the conversations that we've just been having around revenue, we still have some daylight between kind of our goals in terms of making sure that we're supporting our schools and making sure that we have the revenue matched to those investments. But it just really speaks to kind of the complexity of having a holistic budget that really meets all of our community needs. So that said, one of the things that artificially constrains our education system is that we have a cap on how many students the state will pay for special ed services for, regardless of how many kids qualify in a district. And then the districts are left scrambling to try to fund that remaining need, whether it be paraeducators or special services. So part of what we're trying to do with this new move in special ed as it moves through the chambers is make sure that we can remove that artificial cap of how many kids can have coverage, which in our area we actually have higher than the state average of kids with independent education plans and special needs plans. And so we really want to make sure that that will help not only make sure that the kids and the families have the supports that they need, but also that we're helping our districts balance their budgets at a time when we know across the 40th district our schools are really hurting for those resources.
Thank you. Next, we have another live question. This time it is with Kalia, who has a question about tuition assistance. Hi, Kalia.
Hi, this question's for Representative Lekanoff. I'm Claire with the United Auto Workers at Western, and last spring, student workers went on strike to secure tuition assistance. I think you were there with pizza. You're championing a proviso to fund the program, but it looks like it's absent from the Senate and House budget proposals. How can we get that program funded?
No, Kalia, it's great to hear your voice, and thank you. I think we also met in my office, and you helped me with the proviso. First and foremost, I want to thank our colleague from the 42nd, Representative Joe Timmons, who worked really hard on providing to make sure that our union workers were funded, not only at Western Washington, but also across Central, Eastern, and Evergreen. The proviso you and I worked on was to be able to provide the funding to help those next level of collective bargaining through Western Washington University. Although it isn't in the budget, we are engaging in conference. And while in conference, the House and the Senate will be negotiating back and forth on what wasn't in the budget and what we can include in the budget. The great start with the Western Washington is they've already done the agreement with Western. The work is already there and needs to be implemented. So your ongoing advocacy and the work that you guys are doing in calling and contacting my office, Liz and Alex's office, and Joe Timmons' office, and our other colleagues will continue to move the funding forward.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Anne, who has a question about pro-democracy bills. Hi, Anne.
Hi. Thanks for your time. I got to get back to where I was seated. Okay. So democracy is a top issue for me, and I'm concerned that no pro-democracy bills passed the House this year. I understand that there's a limited time during session, but this should be a top priority. What will you do to champion democracy between now and the next legislative session, and during the next legislative session? And how can we help you?
Anne, are you thinking about like ranked choice voting?
Sorry, she's gone.
Oh, well, I will guess that what you might have been talking about is ranked choice voting, which I think all three of us support. Liz is shrugging her shoulders. Of course, we all support ranked choice voting. And I will just be honest, that is a tough sell to change the electoral system right now. There has been challenges with an early iteration in Washington of how ranked choice voting worked back in the 1990s. I wasn't in Pierce County when that happened, but folks who were working in Pierce County in the 1990s still have a bad taste in their mouth, and we're still working to overcome those concerns. So that's something we've got to keep working to get to. And I'm sorry, I don't know if you were thinking about other kinds of pro-democracy bills. I'll just mention one other that I was a little disappointed we didn't get across the finish line. Would have required better transparency from organizations that are collecting signatures, like for initiatives. There's been some shenanigans and some rulings about the way that those signature gathering operations have worked and have sort of conflated funding for multiple different initiatives at the same time.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that we will get that one across the finish line too, although not in the future, not in this. So.
All right. Next up is another live question. This is from Laura, who has a question about ferries. Hi, Laura.
Hi, I was just wondering what the plan is for improving ferry service, especially on the San Juan Island routes where the ferries are breaking down constantly. I heard something earlier that you're looking at making repairs, but I'd love to hear something more concrete.
I'll jump in. This is Liz again. I'm on the Transportation Committee, and we got a lot of really positive feedback from our county commissioners for the fact that we were able to include in our budget keeping the third watch service restored on the Inter Island run this year. They're still continuing to work on the potential of providing passenger-only service through the San Juans, and we've been supportive in helping them with that. And then we were very adamant about keeping our workforce development resources in place. The last thing you want to do when you finally are setting up a successful program of getting folks trained up to be in both the engine room and on the decks and hopefully on their way to the pilot house is to truncate that program. So we made sure that remains fully funded so we can continue to get our next generation of mariners onto the water. And then additionally in May, we will start getting back our first round of requests for proposals to build the next 5 large ferries for the fleet. So anxiously awaiting those proposals coming back so we can get boats built as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and 100%. And we'll just add that that towards that construction of 5 new ferries that we urgently need. I mentioned earlier that we are bumping different projects out of or kicking the can down the road on other expansion projects and other big costs in the transportation budget. And so it is meaningful to me that we were able to not only protect the funding for that commitment for 5 new vessels, but recognizing what's happened with inflation, the risks of growing costs from tariffs and other things. We've in the House have put more than $300 million more towards completing that goal in the coming years. And I think the number might be a little different in the Senate, but the principle is the same. We're committed to building those 5 new vessels.
I think, the conversation with ferries in the San Juan Islands always comes up in a proactive conversation when the 3 of us are sitting around the table. I want to thank San Juan Islands. When I went out for your town hall, I had 75 members also asking, what are we going to do to improve the ferry system? I think one thing by having Liz chair of our ferry caucus, she's really educated Washington State, and there are over 50 members in the ferry caucus, Liz? Somewhere close to that, and raising the awareness that the San Juan ferries is unique to Washington State, as there's no other way to transport on and off for medical, for the safety of our children, for groceries, for the transportation of our waste, for the transportation of supplies. I think between the 3 of us, we have taken the San Juan ferries and made sure that we pushed it up to the top of the list of awareness for Governor Inslee to put him in $1 million to San Juan County to find solutions to make sure we get moved to the top of the list for ferries that are being built, but just educating Washingtonians on how important and vital that is to our 40th transportation system.
Thank you. This might be our last question, and it is from Carol, who has a question about the federal government and Social Security. Hi, Carol.
Well, I've heard so many. I've been listening all along, and I agree with the ferries. I just wanted to add my 2 cents to the ferries because I would rather take the ferry across the inland waters and then get on the freeway and go down on the other side so that I don't have to go through Seattle and all of that. I have 2 daughters who live in Kelso and in Tacoma. And the number of cars that are going down that way, well, you could take the ferry, but the ferries are so expensive too. So, but I really appreciate all of you who have continued your focus on ferries because they're one of the wonderful things that we have in Washington. So I appreciate all of that you were working on. What my question was because of all of the cuts that are coming in Social Security, and I already know of one elderly couple that did not get their Social Security this month. And that's just one of the things that has been on my mind about older people. And I'm a retired teacher, and I'm older too, but there are some older people who don't get very much. And they are living on starvation almost right now. And is there anything that we in Washington have done to think about some of the people that are going to be kicked out of their housing or not have enough food to eat? That's my question.
All right. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for your question. And I think when I spoke earlier about home, health, and hope, that really keeps us streamlined together. There's been some continued investments at the Senate and the House to protect some of the funding and the programs that come through for our most most precious, our elders and our children. You know, just letting you know, something that was important was food security. We kept $93 million in to maintain food emergency assistance, continue to fund our senior nutrition programs that helps 13,000 seniors across the state. And as we start focusing on our elders and our youth and protecting our programs, we also have programs that are in our senior living that helps transport our elders. And then we also have invested in our caretakers, which is also being sure that our elders are being seen and that we're able to caretake them.
Thank you. Well, you know, that is all the time we have tonight. Thank you so much for getting on the call and asking your questions and listening. We're going to go to closing remarks first, and we're going to start with the Senator.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all of you who spent your evening with us here tonight to check in on the work that we're up to and how your democracy is working. We really are here hard at work every day, keeping your stories and your comments in our hearts as we deliberate on really tough public policy and budget decisions. But we're always centering our communities, our kids, our elders, our working people, to make sure that we're making good decisions on your behalf. But we can't do it without you. You made the first step by showing up here tonight, and just keep in touch.
Yep. Next, Representative Lekanoff.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Liz and Alex, we had 250 people in our town hall in that beautiful commons that was just built by Mount Vernon for our communities. And I believe we had over 980 on our call tonight. Thank you for the over 1,000 voices that are listening and hearing us today. It's a pleasure to serve with all of you. I rely heavily upon my two colleagues who are friends, but they're champions of the 40th. And I think between the three of us, we carry our voices, but we can't do it without you. Please continue to contact us. Please keep our staff in your prayers and in your thoughts and mind, because without the staff that we have here tonight, I don't know where we'd be, Liz and Alex. We'd be a little lost trying to manage all this. But it really was a great night tonight, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you all for showing up to participate in democracy. We could not do this job without you. It's an honor to serve. It's hard sometimes, but grateful for every day that we get to work for and on behalf of this community. Thanks for being part of it.